40 chess. Yeah. 40 chess. 40 chess. Let's get it.
Yo, is that T-Dog?
40 chess.
40 chess. What happened, man? Halfway through.
That was a nice little pause, man. It was just like, we're good.
That's a great omen to start the show off, right? Like, blow up right halfway through.
That's great. No way we'll edit that out at all. Ever.
No chance. 0%. What up, Koopa? 13-hour workday.
He was telling me about that last night. He had about 8 hours of driving.
Damn,
4 hours
Koopa.
one way.
I was out here tagging him and shit, and like, thinking just he hasn't seen it. My bad, Koopa. I didn't realize you had a fucking 13-hour workday. Way to go.
He's like, I don't like you. Welcome in, everybody, to the 40 Chess Dynasty Football Podcast. We're glad you're here today. Adam, I see you just joined a startup.
I did.
That I was in.
I did.
How are you encroaching on my territory, right? These are my fish.
Well, I decided that, certain fish, there's competition in those waters, Got to see who's going to catch the fish, actually.
They're big on you right now, man, too. They're like, after Raptor pays, we can go. So
I seen that. Don't worry. I'll have some time. Mike has a lot of ad-lib sessions that I can go hit the league safe up and get this all squared away.
That's tough, man. How you gonna do me like that?
Come on now, Dynasty Degenerates. Don't act like I'm out here capping,
I did got something good that I wanted to talk about, though. We did the trade show or whatever, and just spitballing while I was sitting around thinking.
Poor Pello.
Yeah, poor Pello. We'll put it as a music video, right?
There you go.
Like a playlist, all the fizzle intros.
Hey, listen, we'll have a little album for him before it's all said and done, right? Like the intro album.
We got a good one. We got our own bagger, straight from fizzle. But anyways,
what are we gonna get to? Before we forget,
we're gonna talk about the quarterbacks, right?
Okay.
We kind of touched on it a little bit. Quarterback scoring as a whole was down. Warp graphs across the board down. It was down in 22. 23 was even worse. Like, even worse, top to bottom. Kind of touched on it a little bit, but I had an interesting point that I wanted to bring up, and I was starting to look at some data. And let me preface this. There's a reason I hired Dynasty Barry. There's a reason Koopa works for South Harmon.
Yep.
Adam, it's not your and I's forte, but we can look at some data and kind of make dummy comparisons, simpletons. We need these advanced people to explain exactly what it means to us. So maybe it'll trigger something where they want to look at it and go a little bit further. But I kind of just watching football, it felt like there was a lot more, and they kind of said it last year. It didn't really get brought up at all, like in the announcing or, when they doing pregame or postgame shows, that kind of shit, NFL Live, that kind of stuff. But it felt like there's been this trend towards a shit ton of more zone coverage for these quarterbacks. Like,
Definitely.
This is what they're primarily facing. So Fantasy Points Data Suite is absolutely phenomenal, right? I've been a big fan of Player Profiler because it's just so simple and easy to use, but Fantasy Points Data Suite just like takes that and it's like, bet, all right, we're going to blow this shit out of the water. Every damn analytical number, percentages, we're charting everything. You will get everything your heart could desire.
There's levels to this shit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like when you get your first credit card, right? You got like maybe a $500 limit, $1,000 limit. This is the black card, the American Express black.
You can go buy anything. Take that black card. You have an unlimited spending limit, right?
You can buy a $60 billion yacht on this motherfucker if you want.
Speaking of the pearl, the world is your oyster. Here, it's yours. Go ahead, right?
Literally. So I was looking at it and just kind of sorting some data and looking at it, and pretty much top to bottom, they filter it by teams, but just about every single offense faced primarily zone coverage. Almost all of them. So leader in the clubhouse, Tampa Bay Bucks, 79% of the time they're facing zone coverage.
Crazy.
Teams aren't playing man against them, right? They're not singling up Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. The lowest on the list, the Commanders, 63.9, so 64% of the time, still facing zone coverage. Not a lot of man going on anymore. And then, like, some of the interesting stats, they filter it. Fantasy points per drop back. When San Francisco did get man coverage, the leader, 0.78 fantasy points, per drop back for man coverage. Zone, they were also the leader in the clubhouse, though, at 0.46. But just looking at the two columns back and forth, primarily zone coverage, and the numbers match up on both columns, right? You tend to score less fantasy points facing zone coverage than you do man coverage. Here's the overall crux of it, right? So just using that data, Adam, and we'll kind of come back to it and touch on it, and I'll kind of scour the thing here. But do we think, with the way the last 2 years have kind of gone, because the trends are very similar, now it's even more zone coverage this year than it was last year when everyone's talking about cover 2 shell and all this shit. Mm-hmm. It's even more this year. Will quarterbacks adjust? Like, are we going to see a swing? Like, I would say yes, but I just couldn't tell you when that's going to be. Does, like, year 3 of this shit, like, feel like, okay, now, like, the Sean McVays, the Mike McDaniels of the world, like, I bet. Like, we're going to design strictly based off, like, zone beaters. All right, you guys want to play this shell coverage, this cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, cover 6, come at us. All right, this is what we're rolling out, and you're going to eat shit. Or is this still going to take another year? Like, is this still going to be another year for us, for fantasy people, really investing in superflex leagues and quarterback? Like, are we going to have another year like this? Like, is it going to get even worse before it gets better? Just kind of your thoughts on this.
It's a good question. I would say this. What I heard, if at least from you, let me just make sure I'm hearing what you're saying. Me personally, what I believe is that the NFL is one of these leagues. It's they call it a copycat league, right? And the idea behind the copycat league is basically that when you see something work, you go and study film and you figure out what that is that it works and how it works, and you go and replicate it and you make your version of it, whether that's literally copying the exact same thing or making slight tweaks to make it similar. So the reason I wanted to bring that up and talk about that is because there's a very big zig and zag, though, when there's successful type players and schemes and teams, right? So, yeah, you can come out and you may see numbers dip and all that, but, like, the rules are still the rules, and they're in place with the offense to succeed. And I don't think that this is something where, zone coverage is going to keep teams from also figuring out how to scheme against that on an offensive side and have a lot of success. And just like the defense is going to do that, the offense is going to see that, and they're going to see ways to beat that. And one of the great parts about football and just sports in general is the game continues to evolve that way, right? It changes, and you'll see ups and downs. And I can't say with certainty, nothing in life is certain, but I can almost say with certainty that offenses will adapt and make zone coverages pay at some point. Now, you're on board with that, it sounds like, but you're really asking, like, more so when we'll see that. I mean, that's $1 million question, buddy. If I knew that, I'd have if I knew that, I'd have a bunch of tickets out there with a bunch of winners, right? Like, I could see the future. I would say you might start to see a little bit of offenses take off, but that might be something that's really more 2 years away, and possibly further before it's like elite production versus zone coverage is so much that they have to adapt and switch.
I guess for the people who really dive into data, like, one of the things I think, at least for me, just sitting here, and I could be completely wrong, but one of the things I would like to see is the trend from 22 to 23, how much more zone coverage was played versus 23 than 22. We obviously saw the scoring for quarterbacks go down, but corollary, did scoring for running backs increase? Because it felt like a lot of our point per carry leagues, right? Like, the running back warp line was a lot higher than it ever had been. Like, it was either right on par with wide receivers top to bottom or above it by a fairly significant margin, where last year in 22 it didn't really feel like that. It didn't feel like that's kind of where it was. It really felt like the running back was dying as a whole. This year kind of felt like a little mini resurgence. Is that something that maybe there's a connection between more zone coverage and offenses? This is how they're going to adapt. Like, you want to sit back in zone, now we're going to run the ball down your fucking throat, right? Like, we're going to hammer the ball.
Yeah, I mean, now, obviously, I think that's part of it. I don't necessarily think, though, that we're going to be able to, because of that, predict necessarily which running backs are going to be those guys. We saw this year, Kyron Williams. I mean, going into the year, it wasn't even like projected by almost anybody to be the lead back. Even Rashad White, like we knew he was going to be the lead back, but fantasy receipts is a big thing now, right? I'm sure there's some people out there with receipts that they were in on Rashad White, but by and large, the majority of the community wasn't. So it's hard to pick the specific back, I think. There's always exceptions. You tell me right now that if CMC stays healthy, everybody would be betting that he's killing it this year. So there's always exceptions. So it might be hard to predict the specific back, but to the point you're making, yeah, I think that, there's going to be times where it just makes sense to run the ball versus this defense and do it until you see them change, right?
One other interesting nugget while I was going around there and just looking at data. We saw it in the playoff game. At least I saw it. It was horrible. But yeah, it was disgusting. The Philadelphia Eagles faced cover zero. Cover zero. For people who aren't in the know on football. Anyways, if you play cover zero, you're 1-on-1 across the board. Right? There's no safety help. There's no zone behind it. It's nothing. And you play in cover zero because you're usually bringing the house on a blitz. Right?
Typically, yep.
7.2% of the time the Eagles got cover zero. By far and away the highest. The lowest, your Cleveland Browns were only at 1.3% on the year. So teams only brought the house against Cleveland's offensive line, their scheme, 1.3. Almost 7 fucking times more
yeah.
in the season, Adam. They're like, yeah, we're just going to blitz the shit out of the Eagles because they ain't got no answer for it.
Yep.
None.
I mean, and also it's like typically you'll say, okay, we're having a hard time stopping this defense. We want to bring pressure to disrupt what's happening, right? You're going to try to disrupt it versus a lot of times maybe versus the Browns. I mean, right or wrong, they're saying we are going to make you beat the scheme that's out there versus bring something really disruptive because you don't have an answer for it.
One of the good ones, cover 2 man for your Madden players. That's one of my favorite defenses to run. Just cover 2 man.
Cover 2? Yeah.
Cover 2 man.
Cover 2 man. Yeah.
You're manned up underneath, but you got 2 safety help over the top. So
yep.
You pretty much got it about. You're not bringing any pressure with cover 2 man, but the Dolphins got cover 2 man the most in the league, right? And
they need a lot of help over the top when you're covering Tyreek, buddy.
And Jalen Waddle, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want them to go over, but you also need somebody locked up with them underneath. And you didn't want them to find those gaps in the zone, right? You didn't want them to beat the cover 3 or find the hole up the seam in cover 2. Absolutely nuts just looking at some of this data point and just how it fits with football and just generally the scheme that you do. But it did bring the overarching point. Adam, if we don't see an uptick from quarterbacks this next year, what's kind of our pivot? What are you going to do this offseason and startups? You're about to join in another one. How are we kind of preparing for doomsday? Doomsday? I think we talked about we're not investing what we used to in quarterbacks anymore just because it didn't seem to work out the last couple of years, but you still kind of want them, don't you? Don't in the back of your mind you're like, what if this is the year that they take off and go back? Yeah.
Well, I mean, let me just make sure, and Dynasty Degenerates, I want you to make sure you're hearing what I'm hearing. So going into the startup I just paid for, you want my strategy, right? I'm playing, man. Come on now. Look at this guy. Look at that face.
Don't matter. We draft
you see that?
Same anyways.
You got to get him. You got to get him to make that face every now and again. Now, to me, when their values, Mike, I would say I tend to be a little more on the contrarian side in general because I think that a lot of times when consensus gets too far one way or the other, we're a little overboard, right? So that tends to make my takes or the way I value things and probably end up drafting a little contrarian. So, Mike, if I see a lot of the quarterbacks that are that I believe are really valuable and still in Superflex leagues there's scarcity, whether they actually give you points per game enough to win in a specific year. Obviously, you saw this year. That's to be determined by the season. But, I mean, I'll probably end up being a little over the board. I might, in a way, if I'm deciding I want to go not try to win this year, why not edge out the quarterbacks a little bit too? Make that bet at a discount, right? Give me 3 of them.
Yeah.
While you guys all are going to fill out your rosters, and I get it. I'm not saying you can't fade it and can't have success, but even if it doesn't happen this year, Mike, I'm okay sitting on them for a year. They're one of the most value retained like positions out there. The quarterbacks that are elite. Look at Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is a perfect case. I mean, this guy really hasn't even proven necessarily that he's an elite quarterback. He still is value retained. Like, he's a top 10 option. So, I don't know if that was exactly what you were looking for answer-wise, but that's the start of it for me.
I like it. Sitting here thinking about it too. Is there something, at least in our analysis, until the advanced data folks give us all the cool plot graphs and charts and everything that makes it real easy for idiots like us to look. But at least for now, like sitting here looking at start, would it be beneficial to look at quarterback scoring for this year and look at fantasy points per dropback based on certain zone coverages and find those guys who were beneficial, like who were tearing ass, getting after it this year, at least with zone? And maybe a little bit more fading right now, the schemes or the quarterbacks who struggled were towards the bottom, like couldn't recognize it as much.
You could. I mean, I wouldn't say that you couldn't. I think that one, you'd have to go over the information with the fine-tooth comb and then like see if you can see the trends, right? I would imagine there's going to be some to the point you're making. The one thing I will say that I've learned, Mike, from last year in a lot of different ways, and it kind of makes itself more clear every year, but you have to go through different avenues of where it makes itself clear. To be more specific, what I mean by that is when you learn from something each year, it's because you kind of like, I'll tunnel vision on information from last year or the year prior. Last year for me, it was warp. Like, even though I knew it wasn't predictive, I may make certain predictions based on warp that was in the last year or 2 years. So while, yes, you could do that, I would be cautious of overdoing the merit or how much like specifically you're putting into said information, because all things change. The only thing that's consistent in the National Football League, I believe, Mike, is change. Like, every year there's change in some way, shape, or form. So
I got you too. At least how they list it out on fantasy points, the data suite here, they also give you how often that quarterback faced that coverage, like percentage of coverage too.
Okay.
So you can kind of do your own filtering just by matching them up and going, okay, if you faced really low amounts of cover two, do I really give a shit what your fantasy points per dropback was? Like, that primarily wasn't what you were facing, right?
Right. Yep.
Good example. All right. So I looked at quarterback fantasy points per dropback for cover two. We'll start there, Adam. Guys who faced it over 10% and who finished towards the top in fantasy points per dropback: Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, Joe Flacco, and Matthew Stafford. All above 0.4 fantasy points per dropback, all faced cover two over 10% of the time. As far as fantasy points per dropback leader in the clubhouse, like, for example, with the filtering, Brock Purdy was number 1 at 0.5 points per dropback, and you're like, holy shit. But he only faced cover two. They have it listed at 5.4% of the time, so pretty far down there. Let's see. How about cover three? This is kind of interesting. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, so some of the information, though, isn't really indicative. Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, their style of play is kind of, it's not going to matter. Those are guys that their rushing floor and their rushing touchdown, specifically upside, is just ridiculous. So they're going to probably be at the top no matter what the coverage was, I'd imagine, for the most part.
Well, how about this one for a little nugget, though? Bryce Young, towards the top.
In cover three?
Cover three. Yep, and he got 43.4% of the time he faced cover three. 0.46 fantasy points per dropback.
That's what's crazy about that if you think about that. So you're saying in cover three he was number 3 overall?
Yep. Number 3
and he
overall.
faced it 43% of the time.
Quite a bit. By reference, Josh Allen's leading at 0.5, but he only got it 21.7% of the time.
Well, the reason I want to make that clear is like, okay, so you're telling me right now 43% of the time that Bryce Young was facing cover three. He was the number 3 quarterback in points per attempt per dropback on that. Okay. Now think about this though. What's crazy about this? Like, you know what? That almost is. I don't like that for him at all. So you're telling me almost half the time he was number 3?
Yep.
And he still finished that bad?
Yep.
That's not good for me, honestly. That's a stat I don't like seeing.
Oh, this would be my fault.
Okay, I was gonna say that something seems wild with this.
My bad. I got off with the columns here. They got multiple columns, so this was the defensive fantasy points per dropback.
I was gonna say.
So this is a bad one you don't want.
Well, I was gonna say. I was gonna say
Scratch all that shit I just said.
I was gonna use the Will Ferrell. The math seems to check
Ain't
out. Math ain't mathin'. No.
Yeah, he was absolutely horrendous.
Okay.
When I sorted by quarterback points, he was .23 fantasy points per dropback for his cover 3 percentage that he faced. Not good. Not good at all. Your leaders. We got 1, 2. I'll just go 35%, seems like. So your top 5. Taylor Heineke got cover 3, 42.8%. He got .56 fantasy points per dropback. A little bit probably smaller sample size than everybody else in and out of the lineup. But
Yeah.
Brock Purdy, .51 again, but he got it 41.4% of the time. So he killed cover 3.
Okay.
Jared Goff, C.J. Stroud, and Kirk Cousins with his small sample size as well. Those are your top 5.
Top 5. All right.
Yep. Cover 4. I'll make sure I sort the right column here. Tyrod Taylor. Small sample size, I get it, but .63 fantasy points per dropback. He got it 16.5% of the time. Deshaun Watson. .62 fantasy points per dropback. He got it 16.8% of the time. Will Levis, Jake Browning, and again, Brock Purdy.
Brock Purdy.
So far, Brock Purdy is turning up. Like, for you play zone against Brock Purdy, you're messing with fucking fire, boy.
I mean, well,
Which could explain why
if
they
we take
face such few zone coverages, right? Like, right,
I mean,
or such few man coverages because they killed it in man. They
Right.
did pretty good against zone.
yeah. I mean, if you think about it though, right? Like, if you're playing Brock Purdy in zone, you're saying he's lighting up zone coverages, right? That's the
right now.
the overarching theme. If you sit in a zone and you tell Brock Purdy he is going to have weapons everywhere, he just has to find the guy that's in the hole. I mean, doesn't that make sense? And that's kind of what to your and I point. Like, if you have to find Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, or CMC in zone coverage without a lot of pressure coming your way, you just don't have to make mistakes, right? Just don't fuck it up.
So here's kind of a caveat too, and I've seen Debo do this throughout the season, right? When he really dives into his primer, and he's had some massive hits by looking at the data and then kind of matching it up versus what scheme they're going to face.
Big time.
So I just gave you, in man, Brock Purdy was deadly, right? We'll just stick with Brock Purdy. He was absolutely deadly. .79 fantasy points per dropback if you played man coverage against Brock Purdy. Horrible decision, right? You'd much rather play cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, where he's like 0.5 points, right? Here's the thing. Brock Purdy is absolutely horrendous against cover 6. 0.2 points, like Bryce Young level. Bad.
Interesting.
So, I don't know defensive schemes, right? Like, but you can get the data on it. This is what this is telling me. Listen, I would assume there's smart-ass NFL people out there, but they also do dumb shit from time to time where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. Which is also what gives us, all of us coaches on Twitter, all of us GMs on Twitter, like, hope, because you're like, what the fuck were these guys thinking? But let's just benefit of the doubt. If I'm the Detroit Lions, like, if I've got a decent cover 6 package, like, wouldn't you look at something like that and go, yeah, this weekend, this is what we're fucking feeding you, man. We ain't playing man. We're going to mix up coverages, but we're going to try to play quite a bit of cover 6. You struggle with it.
Right. Yeah.
He's been horrendous with it. But at least in cover 4, right, Tyrod, Deshaun Watson, Will Levis, Jake Browning, Brock Purdy, those are your leaders. Jared Goff is up there at the top. Cover 6, Desmond Ridder, right, .72. He only got it 6% of the time, though, so you lose. Nick Mullins, in his small sample size, got cover 6 22.3% of the time, had 0.5 fantasy points per drop back. Kirk Cousins, same thing. So apparently the Vikings as a scheme, you got 2 quarterbacks up here. Even though they both had smaller sample size, you give the Vikings cover 6. Maybe it's a Justin Jefferson thing. Justin Jefferson just knows how to get open in cover 6. TJ Hawkinson, maybe.
Right.
They fucking nuked it. They nuked cover 6, so they figured that part out. Russ, Danger Russ, did pretty well against cover 6. And Jake Browning, again, in the list. Kind of Jake Browning up here figuring out zone coverages. So.
Jake Browning probably – I bet you Jake Browning was pretty good against a lot of the coverages. Now, I'm sure there was a couple that were like, okay. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of impressed just looking at this, how good Brock Purdy was against a lot of these defenses.
Yeah. I mean, well, the I don't know exactly how you want to phrase this, but like the proof's in the pudding. I mean, I don't know what exactly you want to use, but like the guy was good all year as far as the numbers look, right? I mean,
yeah.
So they're going to probably be versus most schemes, most situations. You'll see probably ebbs and flows as far as like where he really excelled and where he kind of excelled and where he was not as good. But by and large, man, Brock Purdy was pretty good this year, man, as a quarterback.
I thought it was interesting too because a lot of things we always look at. The Senior Bowl is going to be starting up, right? I mean, you got the one-on-one DB drills, and if you guys remember last year, Tank Dell just nuked everybody. you could cover him.
Yeah.
Great success story because the year before, right, wasn't it Velus Jones who was dominating everybody in one-on-ones, and then you saw what that he was shit.
Yep.
Shit. But with the amount of zone coverage it plays, like, does it really matter as much anymore if a wide receiver can win versus man? Like, we kind of judge prospects on that, right? I love the work Matt Harmon does with reception perception.
Yeah.
The man charts. Like, I think it's still probably a necessity that you're able to beat man coverage, but damn, the defenses seem to be going to zone so damn much.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this, though. Yes, I think you do. And I think that there are certain times where, like, receivers that are the most dominant, you're going to see their versus man coverage, they eat it up. And, like, if you look at the numbers through the quarterback lenses like this, I'm sure there are things, and they're kind of telltales for what NFL defenses are going to try to do to start the year off, especially until we start to see what it looks like. But, Mike, I think by and large in the NFL, like you see I think the most important thing for wide receivers is their route running ability and their versatility. And the more versatile you are, the more you can beat both zone and man, the more you can play both inside and outside. It just is that leveling up to get to the guys that can do whatever they want to do. Justin Jefferson's, Jamar Chase's. They're not one dimensional. They can do whatever they want to do. Versus man, versus zone, they eat it all up. Muted. Big Holmes.
Listen, I just like to do things and pretend like I'm talking. I went over to look at wide receivers. Same thing. Kind of the same exercise we're going to go through. Let's look at wide receivers versus different coverages. Tyreek Hill. Don't fucking play man against him. Fantasy points per route run. 1 fantasy point for every route ran against man coverage. 1.03 to be exact. CeeDee Lamb, Nico Collins, Mike Evans, DJ Moore, AJ Brown, Jefferson, Christian Watson, smaller sample size. Fucking Brevin Jordan. Don't play man against Brevin Jordan, Adam.
He's an athlete, man. What do you want? Mano versus Brev. Get out of here. 76 yards to the house,
You know who's not, like, I don't know how far down I have to scroll this, but this kind of makes sense now that I'm just thinking about it. You know who's not up here versus man?
Like what guys don't really excel versus man as much?
I mean, I guess it's top 30, so it's like still decent. But at least for the season that he had, I would have figured it'd be higher. But I imagine when we go over to zone, it's a much different story.
There was two guys I was going to guess, Puka and Amon-Ra.
Mr. Amon-Ra.
I'm just and this is more so that I think they're going to excel more against zone than they are against man coverage.
Yeah, Amon-Ra's not up here either, man. Good call.
Hey, listen, I may not be Koopa, I may not be Barry, but I watch a shit ton of football. I watch more football than I care to admit.
Some things, my friend.
Yeah.
I'm tired of scrolling. Get fighting.
Now, Mike, that's actually something to keep in mind, though, for certain receivers, honestly. If you played man coverage against Puka every play, if that switched back to be something that was the majority of what the NFL is playing, he may not be wide receiver 5 anymore. I mean, I think he'll still be really good, but
yeah, might get slowed down just a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
How about cover 2? Fantasy points per route run. Tyreek Hill, just good any coverage.
That's what I was trying to. That was kind of what I was getting at the start. Like,
Yeah.
there's certain receivers that are going to beat whatever you throw at them. Now, to what degree they beat it will change. But
Puka Nacua got cover 2 16.5% of the time he was on the field, and he nuked it 0.79 fantasy points per route run. So yeah, there it is, the zone.
Yep.
David Bell up here, boy. Don't play cover 2.
Mike,
David Bell.
but just think logically about this. Like it seems fun. What is that? What are all those guys? They didn't destroy the combine, and their IQ, they're able to sit down in the zone and find the hole.
Yeah.
David Bell was one of the most polarizing guys until he ran the combine, and everyone was like, "Yeah, I'm out." Right? Versus man, you have to go beat your guy one-on-one. Different story.
T.J. Hawkinson up here for tight end purposes, 0.88, number 2 overall.
Versus
two.
cover 2. That makes sense. I mean, not that he's not athletic, but he's really good at finding holes in defense.
Cover 3, Tyreek Hill. Imagine that. Jefferson, Nico, A.J. Brown, Sam Laporta,
Imagine that. Oh, Sammy Ballgame, cover 3.
Mike Evans, Rashee Rice, Kendrick Bourne before the ACL, Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra.
Try to tell you about some Kendrick Bourne, man.
He did, man. Cover 4, Jalen Waddle. Play man, cover 2, cover 3, Tyreek Hill kills you. Play cover 4, Jalen Waddle eats you. It's great if I'm a defense. Like, what the fuck do we do? Nothing. Sack Tua. Get to Tua. That's what you do.
But what is Mike? What is it? The overarching theme. You name man, cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, Miami, right at the top.
Miami.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're gonna kill you.
They kind of figured that out, right? Like, I think McDaniel, I trust, to kind of figure out how to beat zone. I think he's done it. Amon-Ra up there at the top. Christian Kirk, Mark Andrews, D-Hop, Debo again, Cole Kmet, J-Mo, top 10 against cover 4.
Yeah.
Interesting. Take that.
I mean, well, when I say go ahead and think about what J-Mo's season was. A couple of plays. So what percentage are we looking at for J-Mo? That's the other thing is, I don't know if that stat comes through, but J-Mo's big play, if it happens against cover 4, all of a sudden
10%.
his numbers are going to look there. All right, there you go. So 10% of the time, and if he had that one long touchdown there, he's going to be really high.
Christian Kirk is by far and away the one that stands out because he got it 27.4% of the time, number 4 overall, beating cover 4.
He was really okay. So I would imagine though, if he's getting it over a quarter of the time, that means Jacksonville as a whole is getting a lot of cover 4.
Yeah, they were facing a ton of cover 4.
Right,
it would be close to the top. Now, for whatever
now, how did
reason,
Ridley
Calvin
do? There we go. That's what I was going to get to. Down, huh?
We're scrolling, baby. We're scrolling. I see names like Jake Bobo, Khalif Raymond, Scotty Miller, Will Disley. Yeah, it's down there, bud. It's down there. But here's the cool thing. If I wasn't such an idiot, they have all the cool filtering tools, so I could just filter out every wide receiver who didn't get greater than 15%, and figure it out. But story for another day. And then cover 6, Andrew Ogletree. What the fuck? Andrew Ogletree, monster against cover 6. But actual players, Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, Amon-Ra, Jordan Addison, Tucker Kraft, Nico Collins, Jake Ferguson, Noah Brown. Texans, apparently very good against cover 6.
Well, the receivers are pretty good against cover 6 because they probably got a certain guy slanging it first cover.
I think to simplify it, if they could just take
I was actually just going to say
2, 3, 4, and 6 and just lump it all into zone versus man. And
I was just going to say
just get an overarching view.
For the audience, I was just going to say that we should do that just to try to simplify some of the takeaways or what we're seeing as far as the data goes.
I think it's so damn in depth with it, but I thought that was kind of interesting just to kind of look at it and see if you can get some takeaways. But back to the strategy point. All right, we're both going to do a startup. I've done. This is my 3rd, 4th.
By the way, I took the 11 spot.
Oh, I didn't even know we were doing Derby. Look at me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I'm second to last pick. Fuck me. A Derby selection. No, R.I.P. me. Hope I enjoy 8 or 9.
I mean, you're going to get what you
You
get.
know how that's going. You always get 8 or 9, right?
I mean, you're going to get what you get. You know, you're not going to get much say in the matter.
That's true.
You're going to get somewhere between 7 and 9, almost guaranteed, right?
All right. So does it change or alter at all? Right. We just think about a normal startup, trying to do one that's not IDP, but normal startup.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a little bit more hesitation once you get past, let's say, like QB 6, 7, and taking these fringe top 8 kind of guys? The Trevor Lawrences of the world, the Anthony Richardsons?
Anthony Richardson, no.
like-
Anthony Richardson,
Okay.
no. Can I tell you what you said to me? It made it very clear for me. Again, one of the reasons I love Anthony Richardson, and I'll take all the heat, and I'll happily take it and scorch me, burn me, and I promise you, I'll incinerate me. I won't die on this take. Is that, Mike? One of the things that those numbers, you can probably find certain things within numbers that say, okay, Trevor Lawrence, this is some of the coverage that he was beating at a higher clip than many, and maybe not others. But really, if you start looking at the way quarterbacks are, their success come as far as passing goes, I'm sure for a lot of different quarterbacks, you can find a lot of different coverages where it's up and down. Anthony Richardson is the most like anyone in the NFL if you were to compare as far as the way he is as an athletic freak specimen, Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. And I believe that the coverage for them, as far as fantasy points go, is not necessarily as relevant. I'm not saying it can't influence it some, but their legs and their ability to score like points, both running the football with yards and with touchdowns, I think is what makes their, not just their ceiling so high, but their floor so high. And so for me, Anthony Richardson, the main thing for him is going to be health. Yeah, he's got to stay healthy. And I think that's kind of the case for most players, although he's maybe a little more prone to it because of his style of play. But A-Rich for me, Mike, actually, nah. When I hear this, I'm almost a little more bullish on getting some A-Rich. Trevor Lawrence, though, yeah, absolutely. Trevor Lawrence is, I mean, at a certain point, why are we putting him that much higher than Jordan Love and Brock Purdy? Not saying that I wouldn't take them 1-for-1 over Jordan Love or Brock Purdy, but like, why? But
Yeah.
realistically, it's, I think, a lot still because of a name cachet, or we're trying to say that this is still the golden boy, and we got a lot of NFL data on him now, man. It's not like this is, some first-year player that we expect to really take this huge leap. We've seen him play for a while. He's got some good things in his game. I don't dislike him, but I'm not taking him anywhere near the top 8, what that probably costs. No. So for those two specifically, yes, I'm a little worried on T-Law.
Do you think, with like some of these guys then, right? So if A-Rich, let's say he's gone, you're on the clock. You got the choice of, like you said, Jordan Love, the 101, Trevor Lawrence, Brock Purdy, like one of these guys in that range. Traditionally, just thinking about a normal best ball superflex startup, would you lend yourself to more consideration for like the 101 pick or a Justin Jefferson or a CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase type?
Then a quarterback?
Than a quarterback.
Absolutely. I think, Mike, that's one of the things, though, that is the way it's currently like sitting and established, right? You're looking, for me anyway, like there's a pretty big tier break right now, and it's not necessarily because of the points per game. It's that I believe that, like, after A-Rich, who I think has a lot of upside. Now, he may not be the most stable. He may have injury risk. He hasn't proven that, like, he has NFL success on his resume yet. But once you get past there's a really big tier break, I think, as far as, like, securing a guy that necessarily gives you that. Like, you could go older. You could get the Dak Prescott types. You could try to buck the trend and say, like, from what I saw with Kyler last year, I think he's that. But I'm not looking to do that in that range. And that's one of the things with the quarterback play, with the zone coverages we're seeing, not being able to predict how quickly the success is going to be for certain quarterbacks to that zone coverage. And honestly, even if, let's say, Mike, it does eventually, the offenses kind of buck the trend that we've seen in the last year and last 2 years especially, what does that really look like? for certain players. I don't know that I want to take him this high when I can get – what do I know about CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase? Amon-Ra St. Brown's even. Like right now, all they've proven is that they're studs at their positions. Even when it's a deep position, they matter a lot. So I'll go ahead and take those types.
So I'm going to listen. I'm hearing what you're saying with the quarterbacks too. I think one of the big things that's going to determine, especially if I got like one of these fringe guys, can they make plays with their legs? Right? If all else breaks down, you're going to face a fuck ton of zone coverage. Can you punch the goddamn football in? Right? Like I think that's probably why Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts are elevated in fantasy points per drop back against zone coverage. Maybe not. I'm not saying they're not, okay? Like, I'm not a quarterback savant, okay? They might be very good against zone coverage. They might be deadly. But they can make plays with their legs. So maybe that's why fantasy points per drop back look so good, because they get a lot of goal line zone. And they go, all right, still punching this fucking thing in, right? Like, I'm going to run through the linebacker's chest. It's going to count as 6 points and, how many every yards I got. Right. It was a drop back. They dropped back to pass, and then they took off and just pounded that thing right down the fucking throat of the defense anyways.
Exactly. And that, I mean, just think about it that from the lens of okay, Mike, put it like this. Remove all the current stats that we just read. Let me just give you like the hypothetical to really think about why this is the case, okay? So you've got, let's say, versus whatever zone coverage it is. Again, remove what the current stats you just heard. Let's say it's, I don't know, cover 4 for the sake of argument. Just pick one. And let's say you got Tua Tagovailoa, and let's say you have, Jalen Hurts or Anthony Richardson. So versus this scheme, Mike, Tua's success is going to be determined based on how his receivers are beating this coverage, getting open, and how he's throwing the football. Like his fantasy point success is not going to be because very often Tua is seeing the play break down and taking off and running. Even if it is versus zone, where it's not like it is versus man, right? In man coverage, this Anthony Richardson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, they could see everybody is not paying attention to him and take off for a 30, 40-yard run. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but if they make a run for 7 yards on a play, whereas Tua ends up with an incompletion or throws it out of bounds, like, do you know how much drastically that's going to sway towards the player who's running the ball? Like, it's significantly changing the points per game structure. Even if they took off and run for 2, like you got a 2-yard run versus someone throwing the football out of bounds, and then you stack those up over all the times they're playing, and you'll really understand why. Yeah, it's the Konami code, right?
So would that also then, at least for me, like I'm looking at it, would that translate to at least a little bit to how we're going to value some of these rookies coming in, quarterbacks, right?
I mean, it like should, and this is why Jaden Daniels, I think, is somebody that right now, I know I like Drake May, and I think Drake May can run the football, but I know Jaden Daniels has, like, ridiculous upside as a rusher, and that's why I want Jaden Daniels in a lot of spots.
Where Michael Penix has damn near none.
Yep.
Just being honest. I mean, I went to another great site, PFF College Advanced Stats or whatever, but Michael Penix has 48 total yards on the year from scrambles.
But think about that for Penix, right? This is why in an analytic vacuum, or like from just thinking about it like sensibly, okay, you got an older quarterback that is not necessarily a sure thing. It has issues with injuries, and we're saying, like, not saying he can't pan out, but from a standpoint of what am I want to bet against, and what do I want to bet on, like he's more of a I'd rather either bet against or just pass,
Drake May surprisingly decent
rusher.
Football. Yeah.
No, he can run the football for sure. I mean, I'm not saying he can't, right?
Just from scramble yards, like how many would you guess he had on the season?
See, the thing about college is so frustrating is it counts the sacks as negatives, right? So is this going to count in this stat or no?
I don't believe it does. I think PFF filtered that out where they don't take sack yardage, so it's just purely scramble yards.
Okay, so for this season for Drake May, how many times when he scrambled from a passing play was his total rushing yards?
Yep.
Give me I'll say just right around 500-ish.
450? Not bad guess at all, man.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, I was trying to remember how many games they played and go through it, and I was just like, I think 500 it seems about right. So I'll take that, man. I'll take that. 450.
Let's go see how good Jaden Daniels was.
I'll tell you, that's going to be crazy. What's over 1,000?
Actually, on scrambles. Not
Oh,
over
that's
1,000.
true because it is over 1,000.
Not over 1,000.
I was going to say because
he had
he had a lot of design runs. I should have taken that. Yeah. So what is it? 800 maybe.
721, 55 scrambles.
I'll take those guesses, man. Now the 1,000, although it was my first guess, I needed to reconsider because design runs don't count.
Right. Not too
But
bad though.
what did he run for? I mean, like, wasn't it 1,300 yards or something crazy?
I don't know what his total counting stats are. Like you said, too, with college rushing for quarterbacks, it's such a stupid way to count sack yards against quarterbacks or whatever.
Yeah.
I like the NFL. They don't count it against the quarterback. They count it against team passing yards, right?
Yes, thank you. Yep, I agree with that.
Do that. Do it.
So
the NCAA is so fucked anyways.
I said 1,300. I don't know how many times he got sacked and how much I counted against him, but his counting stats were 1,134. So
Okay.
when you think of just a few sacks, it's probably taking it down pretty decent degree.
Not as far different between scrambles between Daniels and May as I thought.
That's pretty sizable, though, dude. 721 versus 450. It's almost double.
Well, yeah.
It's very sizable. Don't downplay it now. I would say that Drake May is very capable as a rusher. He can scramble, but Jaden Daniels can take the frickin' top off of a defense. Like if you are, I don't care what you're running against him, but if you're running man especially, and you don't have someone, the spy, so to speak, or you have someone with their eye on him, Duke could be gone, absolutely gone. Like I imagine he's going to be extremely fast in the combine if he runs. Here's
one for you then.
Talk to me.
What was Caleb Williams?
I bet you not that great. Solid, but not that great. That's my guess. I'm going to say 300.
207.
I'm in the ballpark. I'm missing, but I'm in the ballpark.
You're in the ballpark. But
even lower.
Drake May is more than double. So that's how that works. I got the math.
Look at this guy, huh? Get him on the analytics team at South Harmon. Look at that. No,
coming for you, DB.
I think that's one of the things about Caleb Williams why I love him, Mike. I think that Caleb Williams is going to be great, by the way. I do. But if you told me right now that I was able to pick up a plus, especially the way we play in a lot of best ball leagues, and I get Jaden Daniels, some people would be like, "You're crazy, man. Caleb Williams is a sure thing. Jaden Daniels isn't." I don't even need to know what that plus is, but I know in a shorter window, Jaden Daniels, as long as he's healthy, is going to have some rushing tremendous upside that people aren't baking in probably as much as they should. Just the way I think about the quarterback position. But I'm also crazy, and I'm also missed on the quarterback position tremendously. Jordan Love, so
I think it's because how he plays, kind of that more like Patrick Mahomes style, where it's
Caleb?
not always about
he's a very tactical scramble. He wants to almost scramble in a way to throw. And then he'll run if he has to.
Kyler kind of does the same thing too, right?
Yeah,
a lot of circles.
Run around, make you chase me. Now, the thing about Kyler is, though, that's different, right? And this is where Kyler's, Konami code, you saw with Cliff Kingsbury, if you put this guy, because of his, bursty quickness, if you put this guy in design runs, oh, buddy, they're freaking crazy with that dude. He's a little water bug. Now, I don't know how much you're going to probably be drawing up any type of design runs for Caleb Williams, frankly.
Yeah. Do you think, just kind of think about it here, too. One of the reasons we kind of like Justin Herbert, too, was just the fact that he's got some mobility to him, right? Some size. His scramble yards, actually, though, wasn't that great in college. His high for his entire career was 220.
Caleb Williams-esque, 207.
Yeah. Maybe it's one thing, though, if we're going to talk about kind of that Konami light code, at least when evaluating, like Caleb Williams, Justin Herbert, that's the floor that you have to hit. If you're at 48 like Michael Penix, you just go no rushing upside whatsoever.
And I think that's the thing, though, Mike. Actually, I'd be curious if you want to pull it up, if you have the information in front of you, what CJ's was.
Yeah, let's go find CJ Stroud.
Because this was, I think, in the Georgia game where CJ's going to probably prove that his was not necessarily the biggest indicator of his ability.
His last year he had 129 scramble yards, so it did increase.
And now the point though that I'm going to try to say here is that I think part of it is really like looking at the numbers, and then also doing like a little bit of a judge on certain games. Like C.J. Stroud does not want to scramble. That's not the reason he's scrambling. He does not want to run a ton. Like when he scrambles, it's not with the idea of going to destroy you in the run. However, he's capable, right? Like he's more than capable of as a rusher. Like we saw versus Georgia, he could absolutely do it. This year in spots, he did it, but he's typically looking to throw the football. The difference is like to your point with Penix. Penix is not going to run the ball at all, even if it's there really. Like, and even if he does, what does that look like? Probably nothing of like substance really for fantasy. It's not something you care about.
Oh wow, I would have thought his would have been higher too. J.J. McCarthy, 168 on the year.
Well, I mean, but how many of his are designed?
Quite a bit.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Right.
A lot of read option stuff. I saw Pello post that highlight reel from Twitter that somebody had made.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a lot of read option.
And that's
job with the fake, man. Good.
And that's good. I mean, listen, that's what he's asked to do, and that's where people are going to say like, well, what? He's a hard. That's why he's going to be one of the hardest to evaluate. Is like, the way they're using him, but. That's kind of a whole different bag of worms, in my opinion. But yeah, what you're looking for is a good quarterback with high upside, good draft capital. But then, Mike, you're looking for that ability to have a rushing floor. Like Justin Herbert has a very good rushing floor. I think even Caleb Williams has a pretty good rushing floor. It's not going to be the thing he looks to do and what's going to be the biggest driver of his fantasy stats. But to your point, he's not a statue, and because of that, he's going to be able to be more effective as a thrower, but also just slightly increase his floor in fantasy because he will run the football some. If you completely, were manned up against him and he sees the ability or sees a wide open hole, he can run, has the ability to run through and score a touchdown even in a certain spot. So that's very different than certain guys that are more statue-like and they can't run at all. And that's what's Brock Purdy at? Let's hear it.
268 in college. So he moved a little bit.
And what, Mike? Let me ask you if you remember this. When I first met Eric Armstead, talking about like Brock Purdy and Trey Lance and his. Do you remember what his wording was to me when I was asking about that with Brock Purdy? What Brock Purdy did so well for San Francisco.
I don't remember what you said. What Eric
He
said.
said that this year for us in particular. His ability to improvise, just make plays when nothing was happening as far as just keeping them alive to get it to somebody that was open or run the football. Like his ability to do that improvising was something they hadn't had because Trey Lance would have been able to do that, but he got hurt right away. And Jimmy G couldn't improvise for freaking nothing. And most of those other guys couldn't improvise for nothing. So that, like, in particular was literally the thing that he said that differentiated what Brock Purdy was. Not that he didn't have other leadership traits and stuff, but that he was able to improvise. And that stuck out to me. That was the first thing he said, and I think it is true about his game.
I'd be interested to see what the analytics guys do say about quarterback rushing yards too, like how important they are, because there is a lot of corollaries for a lot of quarterbacks. I think that are good, kind of have that little bit of a safety floor, right? There's the elite of the elite, right? The Jalen Hurts, the Josh Allens, the Anthony Richardson types. Jane Daniels coming in, that's a good one. Those guys have it. Then you kind of have like the next tier, like the highly mobile quarterbacks that maybe don't put up the 500-yard NFL season on the ground, right? Don't let me be remiss to not put Lamar Jackson in the elite category. But you got the pretty good guys, but the guys that are really talented with their arms, the Patrick Mahomes of the world, the Kyler Murrays. Kyler, I don't think is like a threat for 800-900 yards on the ground, but 400 or 500 is well within his reach.
I mean, he definitely can get that. I want to say he's had some really good rush. I'll pull it up while you talk. Go ahead.
What it was. But then you kind of have that next tier where you need to be able to move around and create Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert.
I was going to Mike, and actually, you know what? I don't mean to cut you off. You finish, and then I'll get back to that Kyler point. Go ahead.
And then it feels like you got the absolute statues, where those are the guys where you go, nah, I'm good. Mac Jones.
Who?
Yeah, Mac Jones.
That Mac Jones doesn't quite hit the same anymore, does it? Now. That was one of the things.
Maybe this is a.
Is this an epiphany?
Detriment to my Michael Penix love.
It definitely should be. And that's more so to the fact of, Mike, that if you get him, it should be at a pretty big discount because there's other things that are deterrents from him succeeding and he doesn't have the rushing upside. Now, I want you to think about that, actually, Mike. What you said about Kyler was so interesting to me because he's a perfect example, in my opinion, in my estimation, from when he was at the quarterback one discussion and why people don't actually – those that really probably grind the data – Barry probably is aware of this. Now, I don't know how much he really skews his brain that way. And this is where with Anthony Richardson, for me, Mike, I felt like I was fighting the world last year. Mike, with Kyler Murray, for the most part, he's a 400 to 500 yard rusher. But the capability, you're like, I don't know that he's capable or that's really. When he was quarterback one or in the discussion, 800 yards and 11 touchdowns.
Double-digit touchdowns.
So think about that, and that's the difference. The difference from being a very good quarterback, Jordan Love range, Brock Purdy range, the back-end quarterback one types, to break fantasy is rushing. It's rushing. Now, the exception to the rules are going to be the years that Peyton Manning goes bananas, 50 yards, 50 TDs, and like outliers in the passing game. Even last year, Patrick Mahomes was just ridiculous as a passer. So if you have that level of passing upside, you can kind of weather the storm. You can beat some of these crazy rushers. But the difference is going to be basically rushing floor and elite rushing ceilings. That's what changes the game in fantasy. And that's where Anthony Richardson, to me, has Justin Fields level type thing, where, Mike, we saw with Justin Fields, what? Team was terrible 2 years ago. He was terrible to start off. He had an unbelievable rushing season, and it just corrected everything else because that's how important rushing is in the scheme of fantasy at that position.
Yeah, the most Patrick Mahomes ever had on the ground, right? Looking at it, the most yards, 389, which was this year, actually. Most touchdowns, 4.
Right.
Last year. But the reason, he can get up there and hang with them, you look at his QB2 overall finish, 25
5K plus, right?
5,000, 5,200 yards,
41
yeah, 5K
touchdowns. Plus, man. He's literally in the elitist quarterback seasons of all time as a passer. Correct.
2020, 4,700 yards, 38 touchdowns. So, you got to be pushing 5K in the yardage column, and you got to be pushing 40 touchdowns through the air. There's very few guys like that you can just project they're going to do it.
On a pretty consistent basis. We actually believed that was going to be the case for Mahomes, and then this year happened, right?
Yeah. And it took a shit. So I guess when I'm looking at quarterbacks, right, the rushing is going to play a bigger part.
Big time.
Because you have that little bit of a safer floor, right? It never used to as much for me. I knew it's been out there. But now coupled with the amount of zone coverage people are playing, seeing how well the guys who have the rushing floor did fantasy points-wise with the zone coverage, doesn't really matter if NFL offenses figure it out or not. Those guys are the safer bets. In case offenses don't figure it out. They don't ever, or maybe defenses are the ones who are going to rule the day. I know it's skewed towards offense. That's just the way the NFL is. But kind of feels like the defense has finally got one, right? I don't know if the purists are going to let it go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's going to be on the onus of the quarterbacks and these offense coordinators, offensive-minded head coaches to figure it out.
Now,
looking at it, how about old Kirk Chains, right? The best year he ever had.
That's why Kirk Cousins is the anomaly, though. Kirk Cousins has always been such a very good thrower, and he gets, he's 4K almost plus every year. He's going to be a 30 touchdown guy roughly every year, but his rushing's not going to be anywhere to be found. The guy can't run. He's not a rusher, right?
His best ever fantasy finish in points per game was 20.
Okay. Sounds about right.
20. 4,200 yards through the air, 156 on the ground. Yep. Also, coincidentally, his second highest rushing total he's ever had in his career.
At 156, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And but he threw 35 touchdowns. So, kind of in that mold.
Yeah, exactly. What I say, every year he's going to give you at least 4K, and he's going to give you, well, not at least, but he's in the mix for 4K, he's in the mix for that 30 touchdowns. Mike, now I want you to think about this, what that really means, though, the rushing floor, and then the difference as far as making the jump to the elite side. So I'm just going to give you, I don't know like how much you've like historically taken a look at like what's a ridiculous rushing season versus what's kind of in like the new mix, and then how that compares right now currently to really the like old times. So you're going to see when you look at this that if you look at historical numbers as far as rushing quarterbacks go, it's littered with a lot of the guys since 2000 because there's guys that can run the football at a much different level nowadays, right? There's better athletes at the quarterback position overall. I mean, there's better athletes in the game overall too. The athletes just developed. But okay, Mike, how many times, forget like actual player, how many times do you think that someone has run for over 700 yards in the NFL in a season as a quarterback?
Do players count for multiple, right? Like the same player multiple times.
That's what I was going to say. Forget players. So this is occurrences. So you will see multiple. You will see multiples. Yes.
I know Lamar's at least twice, maybe 3 times on that list. Cam Newton, Kyler, you mentioned him earlier. Michael Vick.
Vick's on it. Yep.
Probably two or three of those.
Vick is on there. He's on there twice. He's actually on. Can you believe that? No, 3 times. I'm sorry. I was going to say.
I'm gonna go with the total occurrences of 14.
21. 21 times. Now, all right. Now, Mike, when you think about this, though, you're probably you won't be as upset. So on this list, okay. So when you go to 700, you've got Daniel Dimes actually made it last year.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that fucking guy.
Right, and now here's where it gets crazy at 700. Okay, so you got Cam Newton 1, 2, 3, 4 times. You've got Vick at 3. You got Lamar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lamar's 5 times, Mike. Okay, so I mean, like, you got Russell Wilson actually one year had 849. Can you believe that? People really put some disrespect on the old version of Russ's ability to just. Michael, you know what he was when he did that and a few years in Seattle? He was a guy that looked to run, or not to run, he wanted to throw, but when he was available, he might hit you for a 30, 40-yard run in some of those times.
He could move.
Randall Cunningham one time.
Yeah.
Bobby Douglas back in 1972, which is just like unheard of because nobody else on this list is anywhere near that time frame.
I have no idea who the fuck Bobby Douglas is. Man.
I'm imagining this was a lot of old school running the football, but I don't even actually know the
like wing T shit.
Josh Allen's on here 1, 2, 3 times. Kyler's on here once. So Justin Fields is on here a couple times. My point is,
Fields.
What are you hearing though overall? Like you're hearing a lot of repeat names, and you're hearing the guys that are like they're gonna get you 500 to 700 yards almost just by showing up. But when they all hit, like, break fantasy. Lamar 1,200 yards. Justin Fields 1,143. Michael Vick over 1,000. Lamar hit 1,000 twice. So like I want you to kind of think about that. Everyone listening, Dynasty Degenerates, like when you bake in rushing floor, like Josh Allen is great. Part of the reason he's so good as a rusher though is because he's going to hit you double-digit touchdowns a lot. Josh Allen's not going to really break more than 750. That's like his highest. He's not going to go out there and run 1,200 yards. That's not happening. But his rushing floor is ridiculous because you pair that with his rushing touchdowns, and holy shit, dude. He doesn't even have to be a good thrower of the football. Like he's going to break it. Now, if you think about guys like Justin Fields' level of rushing, Jaden Daniels' level of upside, Anthony Richardson's levels of upside, which haven't hit this list yet, those are the guys you can project and say, their floor is probably 700 if they're healthy. But holy shit, buddy. If anyone's going to get in this Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields range, those are the guys. And if that happens, what? Forget it. I don't care what anyone else does at the quarterback position. It's not fair. They're not going to be in the range of quarterback 1 overall unless you're Mahomes type. You know, you're that level of a thrower. If you run for 1,000 yards, you basically can guarantee there's a top 5 quarterback for the year. You almost guarantee it. Justin Fields.
Justin Fields, man.
Justin Fields, Mike, they were the worst team in football. He was not a very good thrower that year, and what? Top 5. And that's like he's the most extreme example in recent memory of why that level of rushing upside just changes the game at the quarterback position. So
we thought Daniel Jones was horrible till last year. Came in, ran for 800 yards.
Right.
did some shit through the air. All of a sudden, he's a second-round startup pick.
Mm-hmm. When Kyler was going top 5, why? He came off the back of the dude having 8, 19, and 11 touchdowns, and they're having design runs for him. You're like, I want that guy. I don't care how small he is. I want that guy.
Right. Man, really makes me wonder if we've kind of just been overlooking Jaden Daniels. I know, like, the drum beat is getting a little bit stronger for him, but from a fantasy standpoint, Adam, what you're telling me is the likelihood of Caleb Williams coming out and beating Patrick Mahomes is probably not very good. Okay, I think he's awesome, but that's like rarefied elite territory, right? There's a reason Patrick Mahomes got a $500,000 contract. Okay, there's a reason he's got all these endorsement deals and he's face of the NFL.
Yeah,
he's good. He's that dude.
Yeah.
To put that onus on Caleb Williams from a dynasty lens, like this is what you have to be in order to be in the elite territory, kind of stinks, man.
Now, okay, you're onto something here. Now, this I think is actually when you get to the level of this point, what you're onto is so good. And I think the best way, like dynasty generers, think about it this way. Why did it take the community so long to get to Jalen Hurts, Mike? Why did it take so long to say, like, all right, Jalen Hurts is a top 5 dynasty quarterback? I mean, now people are trying to push him out of that, but that's not the discussion we're having right now. Why did it take him so long to get there?
His first year and a half playing quarterback, he couldn't really throw footballs that well.
Correct. They're worried about that combined, Mike. But the reason it was even more of a worry than it is currently is because the draft capital.
He wasn't a first-round pick.
Yes, and because of that, it was like, okay, he may be good in fantasy for a year or two, but there's no certainty that he's going to stick around.
Right.
Give him the bag, all of a sudden, okay, forget that discussion. He's here to stay. Like when you get a first-round draft capital on a guy, what's going to happen? Unlikely that it's a Sam Darnold when they're that level of athlete. They know that's, not Sam Darnold, sorry, Josh Rosen, where it's like the guy just doesn't play football in his second year. When you give him that like 4 to 5 year leash, we feel like as a dynasty player, and they have that upside, that's when we can be starting to push the needle on drafting them higher and making it where they're a lot more secure. Because yes, you may be afraid of Anthony Richardson's ability to throw. You may be afraid of Jaden Daniels' staying power as a thrower. But when you get them 4 to 5 years of a rookie contract where a team can put them out there for nothing and they're almost guaranteed to start for that time if they're healthy. Okay, now we're cooking in a different lens. Whereas Caleb Williams, everybody that takes Caleb Williams, they feel like there's no chance he's going to bust. They feel like there's no chance he's going to like drop dead as far as his value. So that's the biggest thing when you tie it all together. If you can tell me the guy has the draft capital and that rushing upside, bro, we have to be probably more so. And that's where I was at with A-Rich last year. That was part of the reason I was so high on it is like, I don't care at this point. He can suck as a passer, but this guy can break fantasy with his legs. And that's where it can be with Jaden Daniels. And when you see guys that come in when they're that level of athletes, if you tie the draft capital in, Mike, and if Jaden Daniels gets the draft capital, top 10, top 15, forget it, man. Forget it. He should be very, very highly drafted because of his upside as a rusher.
I like it. I would say then for Drake May and Caleb Williams, if our projections, I think both of them are phenomenal. But I think you should view them or value them more in that realm of Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence.
CJ
Stroud. Not an indictment against any of them, but those are guys who are going to be more that QB4 to QB8 like range because they're so damn good throwing the football and they have a little bit of mobility, a little bit of rushing upside. They're not Kirk Cousins where it's, back end QB1 is kind of the best you can hope for, right? It's not like Brock Purdy. Although this year, don't shoot the messenger. I know he was top 8 or 7, whatever the fuck you want to throw out. But let's just say historically, like I don't think people are projecting that to continue, okay? He was extremely efficient, had a great time. But if you put them more into that range, right? Like you got 2 different buckets of quarterback there. The super talented, elite Joe Burrows, Justin Herberts, CJ Strouds. They're fine. They're good. They're QB4s. Caleb Williams deserves to be in that bucket. I would say Drake May, in my opinion, probably deserves to be at the back end of that bucket with the possibility of moving up into the bucket pretty solidly. There's only one quarterback in this class, in my opinion, that has the potential to be in the Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes bucket. The 1, 2, 3 startups in Dynasty. 1, 2, 3 quarterbacks off the board in redraft. It's Jaden Daniels.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Mike, I think it's really understanding that Caleb Williams, I think, can have a lot of success in the NFL and in fantasy. But for him to get to the mix of that Jaden Daniels could in his first season, he's going to have to be near historic as a passer.
Yeah.
That's the perspective, Mike. I don't think people really I'm going to say that again. Dynasty Degenerates. Conceptualize this. Jaden Daniels in his first season, if he's a top 10 pick, if he runs for 800 yards, 1,000 yards like he's capable of as an athlete, is going to be a difference maker at the position, Mike. This is what I was talking about with A. Rich, and he was on pace until he got hurt. Now, he got hurt, so it doesn't necessarily matter, but he still has that upside. Caleb Williams, to get to a level of C.J. Stroud, he's going to have to be great. C.J. Stroud was one of the best rookie passers we've seen. And what was his warp finish this year, Mike? In most leagues. I'm trying to remember, actually. It's like, it was back into the top 10? Like 7, 8? Oh, was it 6?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pull it up.
Been like in that range, best case scenario.
And that was a guy that had a great, it was honestly for a rookie season, historic.
Right.
That's what that's kind of what I'm saying is, it's not a bad thing on Caleb Williams. It's not telling you not to take Caleb Williams. It's not telling you that Caleb Williams can't be great in Superflex. But if you're chasing just I guess you should understand that before you draft. I think it's the best way I could word it.
A little bit more safe or shoot for upside, right? Because you're going to have decisions to make. I'm sitting here thinking, do I have Anthony Richardson too low in my dynasty ranks? And I think he deserves at least to be in the tier above him, right? Like Lamar, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert. That's kind of where I have it right now.
Yep.
And then A-Rich is in that tier right below him. Like A-Rich, Jaden Daniels, I think both those guys at least deserve to be in the conversation. It's just a matter of risk tolerance. Do you want more of the kind of sure thing, or do you want to shoot for, if I hit and I'm right, fuck you league? And where these guys are all going to go to, it may feel like a reach if you take one of these guys at 6. You're like, oh my God. But the reality, they weren't fucking coming back to you in the second round, right? They weren't making it back. So is it a reach if the guy wasn't going to make it back to you at your next pick? No, I don't.
Not really.
I don't think so.
No.
I think the reach is when you take a guy like a Joe Burrow, C.J. Stroud, Justin Herbert, before you would take a Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, etc.
Yeah, and it's I don't want to let the walk out of this be those guys aren't great. This is not what I'm saying, but understand for those guys to have, for the Joe Burrows especially, okay, for a guy like Joe Burrow, guy like Patrick Mahomes even, it's not that they can't run, it's not that they can't scramble at all, but their passing numbers, which we've seen them both have elite, ridiculous passing numbers. They're capable of doing it. That's why they're valued there. But they're going to have to do that in a very, very elite way. Honestly, for the historic level of the game to probably be the difference maker that you paid at the 103 type, right? And that was one thing that, I thought going into this year, the reason Mahomes for me was the 101, Mike, is because Mahomes had not shown the ability to have this season. I just thought no matter what happens, Mahomes is going to be doing that. And that was the bet that ended up being so damn wrong. So if Mahomes can have that level of downside, ask yourself if you think there's any other quarterback that can also have that level of downside. And the answer, whether you'd like to hear it or not, is probably yes. If Mahomes can have a bad season passing the football because of the situation, ask yourself if you think that's possible for any of these other quarterbacks you're drafting in the top 5. The answer is very likely going to be yes, man.
I like it. And I'm going to get us out of here on this one thing because it's been eating at me since you brought it up. Bobby Douglas did it for the Chicago Bears. 72.
Boom. Boom.
So that year, Adam, damn, ran for 968 yards, 8 touchdowns, 141 attempts. Averaged per game, 70 yards on the ground. Look at Bobby Douglas go. You want to know his passing stats, though?
Pretty rough.
He threw for a total of 1,200 yards.
Yikes.
9 touchdowns.
Now, it's funny because it feels like so long ago, But Mike, do you remember when Lamar broke that record? That was actually the NFL rushing record for a quarterback for a long time, and then Lamar broke it. I'm sorry, it was Vic that broke it. Yeah.
Lamar broke Vic's record.
Lamar broke Vic's record. Vic broke his record. Yes, I'm sorry. You're right. But the reason I'm saying that is like that the way when he did it, that was like an archaic style of football that like happened to be that way. I'd imagine they ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. Whereas nowadays we're talking about guys that are doing it in the current NFL. It's crazy. They got to be freak athletes. They got to be freaks at running the football. The guys that make that list and at the bottom end, like even Josh Allen, he is a freak, but he's not going to run for. He's not really too much of a threat to run for 1,000. That would be crazy if he ran for 1,000.
And through 14 games of that 72 season, the Bears ran the ball 536 times.
That's the other thing, Mike. They played 14 games back then. Think about that. People are bitching about the 16 to 17 difference. 14 games.
14 games. Kind of nuts. Bobby Douglas led the team in rushing. Jim Harrison. Shout out Jim Harrison. I don't know who the fuck that is, but he had 167 carries, 622 yards. Outrushed by the quarterback. Probably back in that day. You didn't get free beer at the bar in Chicago. Guaranteed.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Absolutely.
Bobby Douglas. Man. Bobby Douglas got the beer.
Bobby Douglas. Rounds on Bobby. Bobby's got this one. Dynasty Generous. This was a fun one. Talking about the quarterback scoring being down and the coverages that we're seeing, right? Some of the differences in zones. And let us know, too, if you hear this, whether it's on Twitter, however you want to get in touch with us. If you had a piece of information or if the information gives you a thought that you wanted to let us know about that you think is a big takeaway that we didn't touch on, let us know. And then it kind of transitioned into the class and how what we do with the information that we've digested. And Mike, I'll tell you this much. It sounds like, at least from what I'm hearing, I won't get the A-Rich type fight on you with Jaden Daniels this year. I'm not going to get the fight on. I think the main thing is with Jaden Daniels, Mike, if you tell me right now, if you solidify that he's a top 15 draft pick, you should be higher on Jaden Daniels than you are right now, unless you have him in the very high territory of quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I'm talking to Mike. I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to anyone listening to this, really.
I think right now I got him pretty comfortably, like as a potential top 3 overall pick for Dynasty rookie drafts, right? But I think it needs to go a little bit higher.
I'll tell you one thing. I think what's interesting, Mike, is that this was a very analytics starting and driven show, and probably the most of it. But I think we can safely title this, and I'm going to get us out of here. You're too low on Jaden Daniels.
I like it.
And just remember,
Jaden Daniels.
Not only are you too low on Jaden Daniels, just remember, when your league mates are playing chess, play 4D chess.
We appreciate everybody tapping in for this one. Started weird, finished great, thought-provoking, and let us know how bad we are at data. We'll see you back here same time, same place next week for the 40 Chess Dynasty Football Podcast. Ride this thing.
Peace.